This is More is More Poly Representation in Media. Thank you all for coming. We're so excited about this. I think this is the first poly-related panel we've had at ClexaCon. So that's really exciting for us. So we're going to get started by just introducing ourselves. My name is Sosa. I use she, her pronouns. I am relatively new to poly. That I've been poly for about a year, or identified as poly for about a year. But in that year, I've done like a ton of research, and I'm just a big researcher, so I'm like reading all the books and like watching all the videos and all that good stuff. So let's get on with that.
Hi, I'm Nicole, Pacent. I'm not usually nervous talking in front of people, but my heart is racing right now. I am poly. I've been out as poly to myself and a few friends for 6 years. And then been in a relationship that was poly for 5 years, and I have a girlfriend of 9 months who is Mandala in this room. So I have some experience with her.
Hi, good morning. I'm Maurissa, Weiner. No relation to Anthony, like Oscar Weiner. You laugh, but you won't forget my last name. I use she, her pronouns. I've been out proud and poly for about 4 years. And my girlfriend's at the end of the table.
Oh, I thought it was me. Hi, I'm Campbell. I use they, them pronouns. I've been openly poly for about 3 years. I've only been in a couple of poly relationships though, so it's been an interesting journey, and I think what's important is to talk about that journey of like figuring out like I'm monogamous, wait, maybe not, and then getting into like the groove of it, and like positively, not in the high school way.
Yeah, so kind of on that note, let's talk a little bit about like what poly is. So if we could just go down the line and maybe just each give a definition of what poly is to you.
Okay, cool. So I always preface this by saying that like poly is different for everybody. There is not a one size fits all. There's not a one structure fits all. People are going to speak about it very differently and inclusively. And I mean, essentially for me, the tenets are communication, honesty, and abundance, really, coming at relationships from a place of abundance versus a scarcity of love and possibility.
Cool, so we're done here. So, I mean, this is not my definition, but the one that I think is used most commonly to describe poly, two-word definition, ethical non-monogamy. Emphasis on ethical. So, damn, y'all are nodding your head. I should have said it was mine. But yeah, so to me, obviously, check to everything Nicole just said, but it's about positivity and love and abundance, absolutely.
Yeah, poly is love, poly is life.
Yeah.
But I think for me it's, because what you two said was very important and I agree with it, so I think what's important too is what poly isn't to me, and that's sleeping around and just random hookups without communication, because that's not what poly is. Poly is like full, fulfilled relationships just with multiple people, and you can have those conversations with your partner and say like, yeah, I don't mind if you hook up with people, but it's the consent piece that you need to focus on. Without your consent, you're just cheating. So a lot of people just assume, oh, you're a poly, so you can just sleep with whoever, and it all depends on you and your partner and the conversations that you've had.
I described poly to a friend of mine when I was first coming out on my journey, and she was like, but I don't get it, right? And I said, well, I'm one of your best friends, right? You love me? She said, yeah, absolutely. I was like, and what about our other friend? Do you care any less about her because you care about me as a friend? She's like, no, absolutely not. Like, they're completely different friendships. I said, aha! I got you. Yeah.
I mean, that goes basically into like where we got this title for this panel from. More is more. You know, people think that love is a zero-sum game, that we have a limited amount, and that limited amount should go 100% to one person. But since it's not a zero-sum resource, like we can all give 100% or more to all of our partners no matter how many we have. So I wanted to kind of bounce off of what Sam said about what poly isn't, and kind of expand on that a little and talk about what other things that we see that kind of come up as people thinking it's poly, but not necessarily, or not at all. Like for me, the big example is polygamy, or like sister wives. And we'll get a little more into that later, but basically, like, along that line, like, having multiple spouses is not legal, and that's not what, it's not like collecting partners, and especially the stereotypical, like, one man has multiple wives. That's not at all what poly is.
I do want to make an addendum to that, though.
Yeah.
In the sense that legally, you are not allowed to marry more than one person, but plenty of poly people actually do have what they consider multiple marriages with its commitment ceremonies, etc. So there is that
Right,
possibility
good
too.
qualification.
Yes. But it is not.
Not like what you see in, like, sister wives.
No,
and
we're not Mormons.
But yes.
That's not what we're saying. Yeah, I just wanted to
No,
quickly
I
follow
appreciate
that.
that.
So,
I would say that, you know, that is a form of being poly. Like we said at the beginning, like poly isn't the same for everybody. Like there is a different way to be that way. But I think for us, the difference in what we're trying to say is like, we're not starting harems. You know, like we're not, like you said, like we're not just collecting partners to collect them. Like they need to be, you know, full relationships. And if everybody's happy in that full relationship, whether it is one person, like in Sister Wives, you know, that has just a bunch of wives, then like if you're happy, you're happy. But again, like the full circle of it is consent between all participating partners.
Yes. I think something that one of the best ways I've heard this described by my dear co-host Lauren, who's also in this room, is that when my mom was having a very serious conversation with her about this, and Lauren was trying to take my side on it. Mom was like, I just feel like it's having your cake and eating it too, which by the way, as a bisexual person is like, shock, like nails on a chalkboard for me. But like, she said, Lauren was like, yeah, no, it's like having your cake and eating it too if you like made the cake from scratch. If you like went and harvested the wheat and then ground it and then like did like made the entire thing yourself, then yeah, you can fucking have that cake.
Awesome. So I did want to, before we kind of get more into the representation that we see, I did want to, before we kind of leave the what is poly, I wanted to see if y'all, I have a couple terms that I would want to put out for like education purposes of like what words we use in poly. So I'll start with one and then we'll kind of go down and see what you guys think. My number one is compersion. As a show of hands, who has heard the term compersion before? I'm like, these are probably the poly people in the room. So compersion is, I had never heard it before I was kind of involved in the poly community. I usually define it as most simply as like the opposite of jealousy. So it's like sharing joy in your partner's other relationships. So, yeah. So for example, like Maurissa and I told my other partner that I'm in love with her for the first time, and instead of being, you know, kind of downright jealous, Panelists, Marissa was like really excited for me, and we like celebrated it, and it was super awesome. So like that would be compersion rather than kind of getting jealous, because Marissa understands, and we all understand that love isn't a zero-sum game. So because I'm in love with someone else does not mean that I'm any less in love with Marissa, or vice versa or anything like that. So that's a big term for me, is compersion.
Yeah.
What do you want to say?
I can give an example, but I won't embarrass myself.
Like tree lights.
You gave me the thumbs up.
I did just do it.
No, I will embarrass her again. So, honestly, it happens often, but like, my husband Gustav is like one of the most lovely, wonderful, open people that I could possibly hope to be in a partnership with, and accepts me exactly for who I am, and has since the beginning of our relationship, since this structure has been in place since then, which we'll also get into, I'm sure, talking about all of that from the very beginning. But in one recent example of conversion in our relationship, you know, Mandel and I met last year here, and did not start dating then, FYI.
But they did move in with each other.
We saw it.
But you know, coming up on coming here again, the three of us were talking the other day, Mandel, Gustav, and I, and he was like, "Oh, guys, it's like your connection anniversary." He was like, "I'm so happy," and I sent him a picture of us from the red carpet last night. I was like, "You two look so beautiful together," and like that stuff is just, I mean, it's wonderful. I feel very blessed to have two people who get along so well as well, in like a wonderfully platonic way. It's incredibly important. But yeah, conversion is like the happiest thing ever, and it does not make you love your other partner any less. If anything, you're like, I love you even more for seeing me and seeing the beauty of the relationship that I'm in, and this is amazing. That's just an explosion of love.
That's what we should have called.
I know.
An explosion of love. I don't know about
Other terms.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do we want to piggyback off of what you said and just define metamor real fast?
yeah,
So,
sure, yes.
Metamor is a term that a lot of people use in, I'm so totally we were talking about it, like in poly, to describe a partner's partner. So like Marissa's other partner would be my metamor. And we're trying to make another word happen called parallelomor.
Guys, get on it. Parallelomor
I was like, ooh, wow.
is your metamor's partner.
I want parallel.
That's metamor's partner.
Yeah, I know that's fair. Yeah.
So we're trying to make it happen. Just like that.
All right, let's just like that.
You guys, get on it. Hashtag parallelomor. I love it.
Yeah, you took mine. I was thinking the same word. Yeah. No, parallelomor.
Oh,
Like, I was just,
No,
no.
because we taught you that word.
Yeah. I learned that word like 2 nights ago. I'm not a book educated queer. I didn't get the handbook, and so I'm just kidding. No, I've done a lot of research, but more around the what we're talking about, like the representation side. And now I'm realizing that because I don't have a poly community to be around really, and so I don't get these terms anywhere except Tumblr.
Did you win one now?
I know.
Here we are.
Yeah, that's part of why I feel like it's so important to kind of talk about these terms, because even we were talking the other night, Sam, and I don't remember who it was, but they didn't know the term metamor. It was, even though they were already, oh, it was you, okay. I didn't want to call you out, but like even poly people don't always know these terms. Like,
Oh yeah, there's plenty that I'm still getting.
yeah, like I actually don't really identify as polyamorous. I identify as ambiamorous, which is sort of like bisexual in a way, where I could be monogamous if the circumstances were right for me. I'm currently practicing poly, so I could kind of go either way between polyamory and monogamy. And that's a big term, like nobody knows, but apparently a lot of people identify with. I've talked to at least one people already this weekend that
One whole
identify.
weekend?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a very good point. And actually that brings up something that I would like to touch on at the top here, which is that, and this is coming somewhat from book education, but somewhat just from experience. I think when we talk about polyamory, people who are not poly often put it squarely in the box of choice versus orientation. And I want to dispel that myth right now. There are people, for instance, like my husband is definitely more monogamously oriented, but he's very open. And in being with me in the beginning, he knew that this was going to be the structure of our relationship and is genuinely very happy with that. But he does not venture out so much because it's just not his orientation. Whereas like my journey to poly mirrors and parallels my journey in coming out to bisexual in so many ways. It was a totally separate coming out, and one is not because of the other, but it was a coming out. And I went through a ton of pain and shit for many years, and dragged a lot of other people into that until I finally had a word for it. And it was like that same, you hear somebody say something, this word, and you go, wait, what? That's a thing? Tell me more about that thing. And then they do, and you go, and light bulbs go off in your head, and you're like, my whole life makes sense. And that was very much how it was for me. So for me, poly is an orientation. It is not something that is going to change. I am 30-something years old, and in all of my time of ever being with people, attracted to people from forever, and the way that I think about things and the way that I love, I am poly, and that is just how it is. So.
Yeah, similar, but at the same time totally different story as most queer Black poly stories are. When I was in college, I was in a very serious, committed, long-term relationship. Thought I was going to marry this person, and then all of a sudden woke up one morning and was like, it's not that I don't care about this person, I just don't feel complete. Like, I'm giving this person everything I can and everything I am, and I still feel like I have more to give, but I can't possibly give any more to this one other person, and I don't understand what to do with all of this extra stuff that I have to give. And we ended up having a conversation, and it really turned into the same conversation I had with my friend that I told you about, and it was like, I don't care about you any less because I also want to care about other people. And I had no word for that until years later. But yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I really like what you said, Nicole, about, coming to terms with bisexuality and then figuring out you're a poly, that one is not because of the other. And I feel like that's a common misconception, especially in the bi community, is like, oh, it's just because you have more options, And so a lot of people kind of conflate the two a little bit, and it becomes this, it's why it seems so taboo, right? Is because you're just being greedy, you want more, you can't have enough. But then you get back to like what you said about, I don't feel complete. And I also was in a long-term committed relationship when I kind of started having these realizations, and she was very, very monogamous. And so it was a very difficult conversation to navigate and to have. And ultimately it was a big piece of that relationship having to come to an end, because I felt like also like I had so much more to give to other people, and each relationship is super different from the other. You get different things from each person. So if your partner really hates doing certain things and your other partner loves doing those certain things, then you found a compromise, And people always say like, well, that's what friends are for. And it's like, it's true, you have really good friends that you can go out and do these things with, but then you're missing that aspect. Like, you have friends now and you have relationships. If it was the same thing, you wouldn't need relationships, right? Like, there's just that extra connection and that aspect to it that just makes you so happy and complete, and knowing that you get to share that with multiple people is what really makes that difference.
Really quick story about how, like, just the perfect example of how you have different people in your lives for different things and different partners that you can do different things with.
No, I got to be dragged.
No. Well, now maybe I'll change my story. No. My other partner and I are each other's only partners that are not gluten-free. And he was invited to a mac and cheese contest and called me and was like, I'm saying this, but I want to go with you anyway, but you're the only partner that I can invite. And I was like, dude, you had me at mac and cheese.
I'm still mad I have never been to mac and cheese.
We'll
There
do
probably maybe be one gluten-free dish.
Yeah.
I'll make it happen, maybe next year.
And then don't invite me and my
That's a panel on its own, a mac and cheese contest.
ClexaCon 2020.
Oh, I was just gonna say, okay, cool, yeah. Going back to terms, because this I think is super important. So there's a lot of discussion in poly and about the hierarchy of partners. And primary, secondary. It's just like, who wants to be, I don't believe that. Actually, no, and it really does, because like, who wants to be put on a hierarchy? You know, that's not why all of us got into this in the first place. We have a hierarchy of people in our lives. Like, hopefully we don't.
This is more important.
Yeah, exactly. This family member is more important than this. You know, I love my mom more than my dad. Ooh, like, I don't know. You know, I mean, maybe, but you know. Ideally not. You know, like that's the thing. Is like, we don't want to rank people. You wouldn't want to be ranked. Why would you want somebody? Well, you know, you just don't want to do that. So. So some people will say primary and secondary. I personally do not use that language, and it is actually, shout out again to people in this room, it's actually because of Carolyn and Kellyanne that I use the term anchor partner, because they opened me up to that, and my husband and I decided that we like that term, that feels right, and it doesn't negate any other partners that we might have. And in terms of terms with any other partners, we can make that whatever we feel is right with them. But the anchor just felt like a nice symbol for us, and came with absolutely no ranking system.
I love that.
I love that.
Thank you.
I know, Maurissa, it's like, because part of that is we've been having this discussion. I'm just like, we're just talking about our relationship. Sorry about it.
This is untherapy.
We knew this was going to be part of the film.
Yeah, but so we're moving in together in the fall. So we've been talking. So we've been talking a lot about that because we don't like the primary, secondary. But there is something to be said about living with a partner, or especially if you're married to a partner, and you kind of want to represent that somehow in your language. So a lot of people use nesting partner to describe people they live with, and like create a home with and or share finances with, or maybe not. So that's like a nice one, because it's like you've kind of settled into something, but it's not that exclusive.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good one too.
The other term I wanted to make sure that we talked about was polycule.
Yes, I love that word.
Which you can't say that and not smile. It's just the cutest word.
I don't think I know this one.
Polycule is I've also heard like polyverse. It's your, I think those are pretty synonymous.
Constellations,
Yeah, absolutely. So that's your poly world, your little polycule.
It's
That's
basically like your partners
and
mentors.
so yeah, some people
Chosen family
the
is
degrees of
kind of how some people
separation.
describe it.
Network.
Network,
Your network,
yeah.
absolutely.
And you can kind of define your polycule however you want. Some people subscribe to a specific type of poly called kitchen table, which you tend to have a more defined polycule. It could include a triad, it could like have multiple pairs of partners. There are a lot of different ways it can be broken down, but kitchen table is basically like you're all close enough to like sit at a kitchen table together and like have a conversation all together and like kind of be friendly or more with each other. Because some people, and this goes back to the ways that people practice poly different. I was kind of talking about but some people want to be really close to their metamorphs, and you want to all be really a tight network and know each other. And like be able to talk to each other, and some people like don't want anything to do with their memoirs. They don't want to hear anything, they don't want to meet them. And as someone who has had experiences with all of like from that full spectrum, they all work in different ways and they're all valid. And it, especially a lot of people who are new to poly have a little bit more reservations about getting to know their metas because it is an adjustment. Like if you haven't been in a poly relationship before. And that actually kind of gets into something else I wanted to talk about, which is that a lot of people kind of view poly as like a fix for either a failing relationship or, especially in this room, a solution for shift wars. I've heard it already this weekend. People are like, oh, there's a love triangle, just have them all date.
No.
And it's like, okay, maybe. Like that could be a solution, but that's, like poly isn't easy. There's a lot of communication.
Say that again.
Poly
Isn't easy.
Yeah, just, if you don't like to talk.
Yeah, poly would not work for you.
All relationships won't work.
Yeah, and to that point, someone just said monogamy wouldn't work for you either, and I love that point.
Yes.
Something that I want to make very clear too, and that has been such a joy and revelation about being in a poly relationship, is that, by the way, it's the healthiest relationship I've ever been in by far and away. And a huge, huge part of the reason is because of the amount of communication and honesty that is required.
And consent.
And consent.
Yeah.
And getting really specific about all that stuff. I mean, I've had conversations with many of my monogamous friends about how I've learned more about how to be in a healthy relationship because of what's required in being in a poly relationship. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that isn't to say, we're not up here like poly's the best, it's
No,
gonna work for everyone, it's the
not
best.
it.
Yeah, and I know that's not what you're saying, that just reminded me that like, we're not up here preaching that, but I always like challenge my friends because they're like, oh, I could never be poly, and I'm like, well, why not? And they're usually like, well, I'd be too jealous. I'm like, well, why are you jealous? Like, what's causing that? And when I feel jealous, because I mean, I'm sure we all feel jealous, like, being poly doesn't mean you're jealous. It just means,
You get jealous.
you get jealous. It just means that you have to examine that more closely and talk about it and be a little bit more self-aware. Like when I feel jealousy, because I mean, I chose to be in a poly relationship and I know what comes with it. So when I feel jealous, I usually it's something that I'm not getting in a relationship or enough of in a relationship, or it's usually an insecurity that I have not worked through well enough, and I need to examine internally.
There's a great exercise in the ethical slut, which is basically considered like the Bible of polyamory. I also recommend More Than Two, which is, for me personally, I like that approach better. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit more modern, a little bit more layman, I think, but the ethical slut is definitely worth the read. And if you do it on audiobook, it's so fun because the women who wrote it are now in their 70s, so it sounds like your grandma reading. So good. But one of the exercises they have in there on the chapter on jealousy is to write a letter to your jealousy. Like have a written conversation with your jealousy before you just explode it out at your partner, so that you really explore where it's coming from and what's going on and what relationship you have to it.
I think that's good. I think it's also important to remember, which a lot of people, when they first start poly relationships, is it's not a competition between you and the other partners. Like, that's where at the beginning a lot of the root of the jealousy starts, is like, they come back and they're like, oh, we did this and we did this and that, and then you're like, oh, well, we haven't done that, you know, and then you start comparing the relationships in your brain and you start feeling inadequate and all this kind of stuff. You have to remember that they are separate entities and that they are going to stay separate entities and that it's okay if they're not exactly the same. And that's really hard to get over in the beginning.
And that also falls in line with that every relationship grows at a different pace.
Yes.
So just because, you know, maybe your partner is doing something with your metamor that they're not doing with you, then you need to loop around and think, is that because maybe we're just not at that point yet? And if the answer is, no, I think we are at that point, then that's something you need to talk about.
There's also just certain things that come with time, you know? Like a 5-year relationship is not gonna look the same necessarily as a 9-month relationship. And in some ways that are like, you know, 9-month relationship where you're still like, hey, and there's a lot. NRE, ooh, this is a great one.
Yeah, new relationship energy.
New relationship energy, go ahead. Oh, okay, so I just got into it. So yeah, NRE is a big one. So new relationship energy, everybody feels that, right? It doesn't matter what kind of relationship, monogamous, poly, whatever. It's when you're just like, can't get enough of you, it's all about you, it's amazing. And they're just, you know, lighting up your world. And my therapist has a wonderful phrase that I use for pretty much everything, where like I'm having a crisis, that's something she's like, okay, just play the tape forward. And so when NRE can become an issue, like where one partner is, they're jealous of the metamor because there's NRE happening with their partner, right? I do the thing where I play the tape forward, where I go, okay, but like again, 5 years down the line, we're gonna be doing laundry together. We're gonna be like doing dishes and just like getting in silly squabbles and things like that. You know, relationships are different at different stages and it's okay. And again, it does not take away from like the beauty and depth of a years-long relationship to be feeling NRE with somebody else. You know, that doesn't negate it. And I think we are taught, and this will go into representation obviously, but we are taught so much that if you like fall in love with someone else, then, and you're having that NRE feeling, then it must be you're not in love with your partner anymore. And it's so toxic. Anyway.
We call that like squabbling, dishes, laundry, we call that old relationship energy.
My other partner actually, like, I think he coined it. I don't know. I hadn't heard anyone else use it.
I believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like, I don't feel NRE with you anymore. And I was like,
Cool, thanks.
he was like, no, I feel ORE. And I was like,
So, kind of going off what you said, representation.
Yeah.
First of all, there's just not a lot. Like, and yeah.
Almost none.
Like, I didn't know of a lot going into this panel, and I did some more research. I found like a couple more things, and most of those things were also problematic in some way. So, do we want to just kind of start off with what we like kind of know exists already?
Sure. Well, first of all, raise of hands. How many people even knew what the term polyamory meant before the last, I don't know, year? You all knew what it meant before the last year.
That's awesome.
That's great. That's amazing. Because like the number of people are like, what is that? And like, and that's fine. We're all learning. It's great. It's awesome that it's becoming more in the vernacular. But like, you know, we in the queer community talk so much about the importance of language and what language affords you, and the freedom and the liberation when you find your word, or like when you make up your word, you know, whatever it is, like it's you feel seen and validated. and you make sense of everything. You know, going back to what I said before, well, first of all, what exists is something I was just in. It's a short film called Other Loving. Hey! Lisa's in the audience here, she's the writer-director, yay! Yeah, it's really beautiful because it shows basically the amount of, like, what is possible in poly relationships in terms of like, the extent of love and empathy, and I won't say any more than that because you just watched the film. But we're hoping to turn it into, it's actually the first 5 pages of a full pilot, and we're hoping to do it as a series. So, yes, absolutely. I know several other projects that are the deal in polyamory that are like in the works but not on yet. I know, Lisa, there was, what's that one that's like super vanilla that you were talking about?
Wanderlust?
Mother what?
Wanderlust?
Wanderlust. Motherlust. Wow. Yeah, that's not what we're here to talk about. Wanderlust, okay, I haven't seen that. I can talk for days about like misrepresentation, but I don't know a whole lot of good.
Well, the big one that a lot of people bring up is Professor Marston and the Wonder
Yes,
Woman.
yes.
How many people have seen that? Okay, awesome. So, I love that movie for 2 reasons. One, it's pretty mainstream. Like, it was out in theaters, a lot of people saw it, because it's, for those of you who don't know, it's basically the story of the man who created Wonder Woman and his wife and their other partner. Now, a lot of people, it's kind of controversial because in real life, it was maybe a little bit questionable on like where, like who had consent where about that, forming that partnership. But in the movie, because writer-director Angela Robinson, who also did Debs, and yes, we love, where is Angela Robinson at ClexaCon? But, so it's basically told through a lesbian, like, viewpoint. Yeah, a lens. And you can really see that, like, the relationship between the 2 women kind of comes about first, and then the man kind of is, like, included as well. Have you seen it?
I haven't, and everyone keeps telling me to see it. I'm going to.
Because also Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And there's also there's like kink in it too. So it's like basically all of the things that I care about. Like lesbians, kink, poly, and Wonder Woman. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of a main thing, but that's, I mean, it is a little bit tainted by the real story behind it. It's not quite as beautiful as the movie, but still, like, to be out there and have like the actual media be really positive is awesome.
Yeah, I think the issue a lot of times is that the way people try to portray poly is like, you have a partner and then you go cheat on that partner and then the partner is like, oh, I guess it's okay, and then you kind of keep seeing the partner on the side type thing, and it's like really weird, but like you, me, her. Yeah.
That's a spicy
You know,
movie that they remade into a series recently.
but it's one of those, you know, when you Google like poly representation in like movies or whatever, like that's the first one that comes up, and then Lost Girl. I literally was like, what am I missing? Because I was like, I don't know that many, like there has to be more, and it was literally You, Me, Her, Lost Girl, and I was like, cool.
What?
Thruple on SWAT right now.
Oh.
Yes.
And that's network television.
On SWAT, you said?
Yeah.
That's on Netflix. It
Thruple
started
on
questionably
SWAT.
though, like the girl lied to the other girl. She started dating her and she's like, oh, by the way. I'm
Oh,
engaged."
unicorn. Okay.
Yeah, so it's questionable.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is questionable, and that's a lot of what we're seeing is stuff that starts out as a love triangle, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier about the ship wars. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just an instant solution for things. Like love triangles, it starts out cheating, or it's like we're bored in our relationship, like, and we want to like try and fix something. We're gonna throw in another person.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The bold type tried to do that as well, and they did it really poorly.
Oh,
yeah.
She was trying to figure out her bisexuality, and they used, hey, we're gonna open our relationship as a way to deal with it.
Could everyone hear what they're saying? Okay.
Yeah, it was extra bad, because it was, I can't deal with it, then I'm bi, so we're gonna open our relationship.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who do that, and it's, a lot of times it's, I know of it usually, which is opposite, is like a straight couple,
Yeah.
where the man is like, okay, I'm fine with you exploring with other women, and that's like very invalidating to relationships between women or gender queer people, like,
I
ugh.
disagree, actually, because for a lot of people, they don't come to either terms with their sexuality until they're older, or they were living in a place where they couldn't come out and explore that piece of themselves. And so if you do have a partner that is like, no, figure that out, like I'm okay with that, then like, awesome, like you have a really supportive partner. But again, coming back to that, it's not a solution for failed relationships.
Yeah.
So if that's where it's going into like, I don't think I like, you know, if you're a woman with a man, you're like, I don't think I like men anymore, so therefore we should open up this relationship, then yeah, that's not a good solution. But if you're coming to terms with like bisexuality, pansexuality, and you're already in a committed relationship, and there's that piece of consent there, then like go for it. I wanna really quickly tie this conversation to the One Day at a Time panel yesterday, because Isabella Gomez went on this really, really important explanation about one episode where they really went into a conversation on consent, and she was talking about how powerful that was, and I was crying literal tears. Yeah, and she was talking about how it's so important to have that visual of that consent talked about in a real way, and I feel like that's the piece that every single poly show or movie is missing.
Yes.
You don't see that conversation, you don't see that consent build and that trust being built, and that is a huge and important piece, especially for the general public to understand that this isn't just like, oh, I met you, we're gonna move in together, we're gonna have sex. You know, it's like, I love you and I want to have this fulfilled relationship with you.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I just remembered this that does it so well. Actually, Robin Wright, God damn it, she's so hot. Has been, that's not a sidebar. Like, whoa. But like, she's been in 2 poly stories actually, which is so funny. I just realized it right now. House of Cards, which we have written down, and while that relationship is toxic and a whole lot otherwise, that actually, that they do that pretty damn well on that show. They don't show all the communication and talking about it behind the scenes, but it is clear that they have an understanding
It's
between
like
the two
a
of them.
negotiated dynamic.
It's a negotiated dynamic, and it's a part of their relationship from the beginning. And I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh, I was so excited. It was well, I still loved Kevin Spacey. Okay, all right. Anyway, but the other thing too, which actually I thought was so positive, is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And I can't remember for the life of me if they really do it in the movie, but they definitely do in the book. They do a great way of explaining that the Robin Wright character is married and has been married for a long time, but has also been in a 20-year relationship with Blomquist, with the lead, and the author explains it in a way that is, he has been necessary to her, as necessary as her husband, and the two of them have a very nice, friendly relationship, the 2 men. And she'll just be like, I'm sleeping at Mickey's house tonight or whatever. And I remember that being like, what?
Yeah.
When I read that too. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, hashtag Europe, you know?
It's a really good example. And like most of the stuff that we're seeing and like that we have, like we're talking about our American media. And I mean, American media is much more conservative than European media and all that. Yeah, Puritans. I mean, you right.
They have, like, Polyamorous married and the magicians, it's like literally magic.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the fulfillment of like some prophecy and stuff, and it's like
Yeah,
It does
the
another,
ultimate thing.
speaking of magic, another recent example, Sabrina, like the new Sabrina series on Netflix. I was really excited because I started talking about poly.
They did.
And then I was like, oh, but wait, they're using it as like a marker for the evil people. Like only the dark people are poly, and it's like, that's actually, I didn't really realize that it was part of a larger trope of using like people who are poly as like a mark of villainy. I've never seen The Walking Dead, but there's apparently a character, Negan, who like is briefly maybe poly, but like doesn't, it seems more like sleeping around than poly, but he's evil. Yeah, so there was that, and then there's Judy on Orange is the New Black, like ends up being a villain.
Yeah, it's usually villains. But
Yeah.
we only have 15 minutes left, so
Yeah,
we should
let's
definitely
start
take
taking
questions.
questions.
Also, I do have, oh my God, look at all the questions. I do have an offer from Mandela. If you want a non-poly point of view, call me up. I'll answer questions. She's primarily monogamous and in a relationship with a polyamorous person. So if you want to ask her questions, just come up and sit with me.
Yeah.
Should we call?
And yeah, we can move down.
I was just gonna say that there's a series called Conversion that's on YouTube. that you can check out.
Awesome. What was it called?
Conversion on YouTube. Thank you. That's awesome.
So last year at the Bi Representation in Media panel, Nicole, you were on it, and somebody asked about polyamory, and your answer was just, I don't know, I could tell that you were super excited about it, and then one of the things that Stephanie Beatrice said is what, as creators, we need to be doing is creating those roles so that actors can portray that, so that people will have the exposure and that language. So my question is, what is the number one role that you would either like to play or to see in media to represent polyamory?
I actually thought that on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, when Stephanie Beatrice's character was like, I like these two girls, they ended up going with the route of like, I can't decide between them, which was also like a valid storyline, if that's not her character's, whatever, but I thought for like a split second, I was like,
Yeah, I was really excited for a second.
I mean,
we're
still
going
love her,
all
she's so
in.
amazing.
Yeah.
I thought that that's where they were gonna go on that storyline.
Yeah, but why not? We're doing a Belgium.
They all are usually friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nicole, you mentioned that you have your therapist, and I didn't realize all y'all's situations.
I also see a therapist.
Yeah.
I'm very open about it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. I was wondering, like, what have your experiences in navigating polyamory in therapy?
Also positive. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so, it's really important, it was really important to me. I had a therapist for a long time who was very understanding of polyamory, but like in terms of wasn't judging me or like trying to challenge it for me or anything like that. But she was stopping taking my insurance, so I was hunting for a new therapist anyway. And something that was really important to me was finding a poly-friendly, like specifically branded that way. If you live in or near a big city, they tend to be more easier to find. I'll have to find the website, but there is a website that exists. Psychology Today, you can filter it. There's also like a specific, like for finding, I think it's poly and kink friendly, or maybe it's poly and queer friendly. Most people who are friendly about any of those will be friendly about all of them. For being honest, like,
Also, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom has a whole directory for unquote non-monogamy therapists. So if it's kink or poly or any of that, they have those resources.
Say that again?
National Coalition for Sexual Freedom.
National-
NCSF.
National Coalition for Sexual Freedom.
nice.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I actually realized that we didn't actually answer your question. I talked about Stephanie Beatrice, but we didn't.
Stephanie Beatrice is the answer to every question.
Sorry.
It was what role
just played in Other Loving.
So
watch it, yeah.
Yeah, and I would love to see more, because I feel like it's a lot of cis white people.
Yeah.
I would love to see more gender queer or gender variant in some way.
Sure, yeah.
Like I ain't picky, but like,
Yeah.
and also there's not a lot, it's a lot of like women and men combination, but I haven't seen anything really that's like all women or all men, whereas like that exists too.
Oh, yeah.
Like there are plenty of lesbian poly people,
Yeah.
or just gay male poly people.
Yeah, I want to see more indigenous poly stories, because especially within like the Dene, like our people were historically polygamous, and that was eradicated by the church, you know, and like by the government coming in and like delegitimizing marriages, or you know, marriages, and so that's a storyline that I would like to see, especially with like people trying to reclaim that identity.
I want to see people dealing with something that Nicole and I talked about before the panel started, but sometimes when I introduce myself like in a queer or poly space, I'm like, hi, I'm Maurissa, I'm a walking stereotype, I'm a bisexual polyamorous. Like, the epitome of like, I don't want to make a decision.
Yeah, and on that note, I would love to see more representation. It's part of why I loved when I did Other Loving. I would love to see more positive bisexual poly crossover, and with an understanding that they are not the same thing, and there are bisexual people who are oriented monogamously as well. I just think that this pressure to only represent bisexual people as monogamous also does damage. I am a product of the damage that does, because I tried for so long to fit into that box because I didn't want to be a stereotype, and then I was just denying who I actually was. And that was really, really bad too. So like more positive bisexual polyamorous characters with like talking about it in the correct terms. You go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that there is a movie that I watched. It ends badly, but
We're used to that here.
they do have the first partner. I'm going to say that because the main character has two partners, and they're not one's more. They've been in a relationship for a very long time, and one hasn't. But basically, they kind of have a relationship for a while, and she falls in love with someone else, and they're very open, and they talk about it a lot. And it's called The Fling with Courtney Ford. But they have a very open and talking. They both are polyamory.
Did you say slaying?
The fling.
That's not at all what I
The
heard.
Fling with Courtney Ford.
The fling with Courtney Ford.
Yes.
For everybody who wants to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But they talk about it openly, and basically, but something happens, and it almost perfect. Yeah.
Before we take another question, can I would actually really love to hear from our guest panelists right now. Some perspective on just what's like as we're talking about this. Yeah.
Wow. We should be here all day with this. Go with you. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is actually going to be a question that kind of works for everyone. But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about dating while poly, especially since you're not dating in a specifically poly space.
Yeah.
In terms of meeting people and putting it on, and then not knowing instead of poly, and then moving on this angle, like falling for a poly person and how you navigate all that.
It kind of crosses over actually, right? Because like because from like the second that we met last year, I was like, oh hey. Everyone saw that. And then she fucking gave me that jacket, and I was like, I like it. And then it wasn't, and I was like, what's happening?
I was in a relationship.
Yeah, but she didn't tell me that, so I didn't know that. But then even after you weren't, and we were just friends, I remember you being like, oh yeah, no, I could never do poly, and I was like, well, what was that?
Yeah.
And I just sort of like did it like okay, I'm not gonna even argue it.
My past partner did actually bring up the idea of poly, and straight away I shut it down. I was like, no, I am a long-term serial monogamous, and I have been that way until
I actually did think it was an option for me, and then my relationship ended, and I was single, and we hung out, and it was just like, well, you know, I want to be open and accepting of whatever I can. So, and we had such a palpable connection from the moment we like locked eyes. It was kind of, it was too hard to ignore that. So I needed an open heart coming into this. So that's what I did. And we made it from the beginning that, you know, Gustav and I actually went and we saw Predator together. And we had sushi and we hung out, and he was just like ultimately, you know, we love the same person and we want her to be happy. So, you know, we're kind of a team.
That's so cute. Good friends too.
I feel like the feel. So I'm joining one of you. Really quick, usually in my relationships, like if I'm trying to form a relationship or I'm dating, I'm usually very upfront early on about being a poly, because you can't just like make this huge connection and then be like, surprise, you know, I have other partners. Also, just because nobody else has said it yet, make sure even if you are, like especially if you are poly, you're consistently getting tested.
Yes, and you know who's in your network. Last thing on dating, I want to throw out, I was using OkCupid for a while. That's because I like hate dating them, but because they have like a filter for like open to non-monogamy, and like in like the first sentence of my profile, I'm like, I have like other partners, and like that's something you need to be okay with going into it. But I usually just filter by other people who are open to non-monogamy if they're not already. So that's really a cool option.
And I've told Nicole from the beginning, it's day by day for me. I don't know what feelings will come up, and that's just how I want to go about it, day by day, and just being absolutely open communication. Yeah, so that's highly important, is the communication.
So probably specifically for you, I'm a little bit more monogamy oriented, but I'm open. And in my first relationship, I realized that I'm not getting the attention that I feel I need, especially with that new relationship energy that I was talking about. And with that being the case, a lot of the time, even in monogamous relationships, people have a hard time juggling time for each other there. How do you feel when, you know, say there's a bunch of birthdays, or say something happens where Gustav's health is, you know, a priority at that point? How do you just kind of manage the whole, you know, I do need this attention, but also on top of that, I get why she's spending time with him. It's not something you really need, but I do.
Yeah, it's constant work. It's working every day, because of course, being in a relationship, it's in a monogamous relationship, because there is that one other person, you kind of want that validation, because that's what they also give you. And if they're not there to give you that, then what do? Well, you learn to turn inwards, because Nicole, you know, she lives with Gustav, and they're married, and they have this already built and set up. They have their 4 children, and they're mine as well.
Yeah, that's
What are you doing? So Gustav is actually taking care of Spartacus right now, which is the sweetest fucking thing ever. So it's working with yourself, and also, you know, remembering that not one person can take everything. So having your own support network as well, and just being like, hey, I'm actually having a rough time, but the person that I want to be there can't, because she just can't, and that's not anything to do with me, that's just the circumstances. So if I have my support system set up, then I think I'm pretty good. And also, like, our connection just doesn't, it's really deep. So she knows that I need her, or that I might need her there, and she's like, you know, sending me a heart here and there, or I'm thinking of you, or I wish I could be there, I'm sorry I can't. So it's just that communication, but a lot of working on yourself. And if you're not ready to work on yourself, then maybe.
And I just want to tag on to that like really, really quick, because I know we're running out of time. Two quick things. Number one, you know, it's funny, like we want our partners to be there for us all the time whenever we need it, but the truth is that like even in monogamous relationships, that's an issue. And like I would say the biggest issues that you and I have had with time is my work schedule. Is not actually. I literally spend one night a week with Gustav. We have date night and then we work, and we are both extremely independent people, and that works for us. And so part of the negotiation of time, because we have had like very real conversations about schedule. They're hard. and I probably want to talk about that. Yeah, we've had real conversations about schedule where we've had to set up like very realistic, okay, this week I can see you this day or these 2 days, but that's all I can promise right now because I'm in a bazillion things that I'm doing right now. You know, like, and that stuff is, again, monogamous poly, like that's important no matter what.
When people ask me about like, oh, well, you know, what about when Maurissa sees her other partners or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, you know, we all have like equivalents of like partner time. We have our families that require time, we have our work. I work 3 part-time jobs, I feel like each of those is a partner, like with my time, and we all have our friends, and we have our one-time meeting too, so, you know, it doesn't make a difference to me whether my partner's with another partner or their family, like that's just time I don't get with them, and like that makes me sad, but it's not because they're with another partner, they're just not with me, so.
Yeah. I wish we could talk about this for another hour, but we're in a minute.
We are all very happy, I'll speak for myself then.
Yeah.
We're all very happy to answer questions outside, or if you see us like the rest of the weekend, I mean, I could literally talk about poly forever, and I feel like I do. Thank you all for coming so much.
I'm actually gonna take a little Insta story because I'm terrible at these. I gotta do it. Alright, everyone sit. I mean, I don't. Okay. I mean, poly panel. What do we want to say, guys? More is more. More is more. 1, 2, 3. More.